So hi there, Eva here. So I promised you when we did this color chart and color wheel of the split primary color set from Daniel Smith, I promised you that I'll do some more color swatches. Here are the 6 colors from Daniel Smith in that split primary introductory kind of beginner's watercolor set that I recommended. For those of you that are new to watercolor and wanted to get like the most important colors at a reasonable price, and that's where Daniel Smith comes in with their introductory set where they have 2 of each of the primary colors, a warm and a cool, of blue, yellow and red. And from mixing those 6 colors, these are, you know, some of all the colors you can get, so you can see this will get you very far. And here I did the color wheel. And I'm going to link the video below if you haven't watched this video, because that would make more sense to you what I'm doing today if you watch this one. Anyway, I also went ahead and went through my big swatch book that I have created here for myself. And here I have all the colors that I own, and that's way too many, as you can see, swatched out and put in a binder so I can easily see what colors I have and compare different colors. You know, some colors will have the same names in different brands, but they won't look the same and stuff like that. So I have learned a lot from putting this binder together, and that's a project I did last year. And now it's easy because now I'm just updating it every time I get a new color that I don't have in my binder. And why on earth I keep getting new colors, don't ask me. It's one of those little addictions. So I'm a color nerd. So there, I admit it. So there was a couple of the colors here in this Daniel Smith introductory set that I actually didn't have. I didn't have the Hansa Yellow Light. I didn't have the Quinacridone Rose already. And I did not have the Phthalo Blue green shade. So I just made those swatches up to put in my binder, and so here you can see they're swatched out like this. And the way I swatch them out, just in case you're interested, is I cut out pieces of 140 pound cold pressed watercolor paper, you know, the arches, in 2.5 by 3.5, because then they fit in my binder here in these inserts that are made for baseball cards. That way I can have them nice and organized. And then I take a fat Sharpie marker and make a black line across about a good inch down. And then I write the name of the color and the initials for the brand. And then wet about 2/3 from the bottom here with clean water. And then I put on the color, the pigment, with full strength up here over the black line, and then I water it down. Kind of the same system as I like to use in my color wheel here. And then I let it dry, and then I take that same color again and glaze it over just a little stripe here so I can see how it glazes, how it, you know, how you can build up the color. And when that's dry, I take, let me show you, I take these little guys that are meant for reinforcing, you know, paper that you put in a binder, and I put that on like this in this little square up here. And then I take not a scrubber brush, but a fairly stiff brush of some sort, and then I dip it in clean water and have it just damp, and then I try to lift out inside this circle, and I do it 3 times. I dab in between with my tissue, and then when it's dry, I can peel this off, and that will tell me how staining or how easy it is to lift or not easy to lift. And the blue, the black line, I paint over that because I want to see how transparent it is. So that's how I do those. And then I end up with writing the pigment information down here. So PR 19, for instance, for this Quinacridone Rose, that means pigment red 19. So all colors of the professional brands will have that information somewhere on the tube, and it's usually, you know, in very tiny letters, and it can be hard to find, but it's there. And otherwise you can also look up if you go to the websites of the various brands, and they will all have a color chart with all the pigment information. But anyway, that's like a side. So here you can see my swatches. These were the 3 I had to make up because I didn't have these colors. And then I went into my binder and I found the other ones that I already had a swatch of. So here we have Phthalo Blue Quinacridone Rose and Hansa Yellow Light, and the Pyrrol Scarlet, the French Ultramarine Blue, and the new Gamboge. And these here, these three would be considered the cool colors in this set for their color, and then these would be the warm ones. So that's that. Now you know how I do this. So now I have completely revealed my nerdiness when it comes to color. And we're going to take these tubes aside too. And we're going to return to our chart here. And you know, I did it on this Arches 140 pound block. That's 11 by 14 inches. But whatever paper you are doing it on, it doesn't have to be on the same. Now it just happened to be on the same. And then I had this piece down here. And you know, we all hate to let good watercolor paper go to waste or not be painted on. So I, after a little thinking, I decided to make 9 areas where I'm going to do some additional color swatching. So I did it like this, and I've already, you know, I thought about this for a couple of days because there's a zillion ways you can do these things. And one other thing I did that I didn't talk about or had done when I showed you how I painted this color chart. I actually took a ruler and just drew a black line through the pure colors here. You know, the French Ultramarine Blue, the Phthalo Blue, Hansa Yellow Light, and new Gamboge, Pyrrol Scarlet, and Quinacridone Rose. Quinacridone Rose is here and it's there. You know, so there's one square for each color where it's not mixed with any of the other colors. And what I could have done if I'd been, you know, wanting to do that, and I've seen other artists do it, that is that you could have painted this so that you did a light wash, and then this part, this triangle, you could then do another glaze over it so that one part of it would be light, the other one would be dark. That would have been, you know, an extra step that you could do. And you know, on this side I have all the full strength combinations of the colors, and then on this side here, if you watch the video, you might remember that I put in water first so I get the lighter version of these color combinations. Anyway, down here, what I have decided to do for you is I am going to show the range, and I'm concentrating basically on the greens because that's, you know, something that a lot of people have trouble with. So those of you that have been painting with me for a little while, you know that I am not a fan of having green on my palette in general. You know, every rule I break it, you know, but in general, I am not, you know, green is the last color I put on my palette because I like to make my own, and I think it's so easy to make your own greens, and I think you get much better greens by doing that. But that's my own little, you know, pet peeve. And you can do whatever you want, and there's no watercolor police that's going to come and arrest you and put you in jail for having green on your palette. Just saying. But I think that a lot of painters, because they've been used to painting with green out of the tube, somehow green becomes a problem color for them because they haven't been used to mixing their own. That's just what I think. Anyway, and you know, you can mix wonderful greens very easily from even a limited palette like this one. As we already saw here, we have a lot of great greens, right? A lot of great greens already. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to have French Ultramarine Blue and Hansa Yellow Light, and French Ultramarine Blue and new Gamboge, and then Phthalo Blue green shade and Hansa Yellow and Phthalo Blue green shade new Gamboge, and I'm going to have them run together so you get more than just one of the combinations. So the way we're going to do that is, oh, and another thing that's going to come up in another video. I had to dig through all my, I did not have another empty Jane Jones travel palette, and I didn't want to empty any of the ones that I had. So I had one empty palette left that I've never used before. That's this one here. So it's a circle just like, and it has room for 12. So that's perfect. So I filled it up, and I have filled it up with 12 colors. So that'll be my next video, or maybe not my next, but you know, it's coming up very soon. I am going to show you what colors I added on to the primary set from Daniel Smith. So I had I have filled it up with 6 additional colors, which I feel really rounds up the Daniel Smith Essential Introductory Set to a very, very useful and complete watercolor palette, staying within the 12 colors that I like to limit myself to. So anyway, we are going to use this palette now, and let's see, we need French Ultramarine Blue, and that one is, it's a little bit like a Lazy Susan, so this palette, so that's kind of nice. And it does have one mixing area by each color, so I can go in here and make myself a nice mix of French Ultramarine Blue. And since I'm not going to use the color next to it, I'm actually going to make myself 2 puddles, so you know, if I dirty one up, I have another clean one here. That way I don't have to stop and mix colors all the time. So that's what I'm going to do. There we go. And I'm going to rinse that out. And I'm going to do that with all the colors that I'm going to use here. So I'm not going to bore you with that. So I'm going to come back when I have all my puddles ready. Okay, so I got all my puddles ready that I'm going to use in this particular demo. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some tape to just not have to spend time on being careful. And I'm using some of my washi tape that I bought a while ago, and I really like it. I think I learned this from Maria, her last name is Raskovsky or something, Maria Jane. She's a YouTuber, she's wonderful, and I subscribe actually to her Patreon channel. So I'm going to put this tape on the top part here, and I'm going to do the bottom too, and again I'm just going to do that and then I'm going to be back. So I got the first row taped off, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put water inside, and I'm going to put water on the whole rectangle here. The idea is I'm going to put one color at one end and the other color at the other end. So here I'm going to be French Ultramarine Blue and the Hansa Yellow Light, and then I'm going to let them mix and mingle so we can see all the different green tones that we get from that particular mixture. So let's go in and put Hansa Yellow Light in here, and I'm going to go down like that, and then I'm going to go in from the other end with my French Ultramarine Blue, and I'm going to let them say hello to each other. And I'm going to pick up my board, and I might give them just a little spray, and want them to use to mix and mingle. So I'm going to take a little bit more of the Hansa Yellow Light, put it in, and I'm going to take a little bit more of my French Ultramarine Blue in. The French Ultramarine Blue doesn't move that much, and neither does the Hansa Yellow. We can see here. Some colors they move a lot. I think we'll see that when we use the Phthalo Blue, and get all the action we can get. There we go. Now it's moving. So you've got to have quite a bit of water, but of course you don't want it so watered down that you don't get, you know, some decent pigment on there. Can you see this? Now it's beginning to run together. That's what I want. And it should give us the different shades of green that these 2 colors will produce, from almost pure yellow to almost pure blue, and then all the green shades in between. You know, it takes quite a bit of, you know, working with it, letting it move back and forth and stuff like that, so that you get like a nice transition. So, but there you can see, and it's not dry yet, so a lot of stuff happens while we're not looking. So I think this will be a good sample of the French Ultramarine Blue mixed with the Hansa Yellow Light and the greens that they will create. And then over here we're going to do the same exercise with the Phthalo Blue and the Hansa Yellow Light and see the difference. So that's the whole idea. I want to show you how many greens you can create from just these 2 blues and 2 yellows. Just those 4 colors together in different combinations are going to give you a ton of different green shades. And then of course you could go in and tone them down by putting in a little bit of red, for instance, whether it be the Quinacridone Red or the Pyrrol Scarlet Red that you have in your set, because red and green are complementary colors, as we can see here. And by adding a complementary color to a color is the same as, you know, toning it down until you get like complete neutrals. So anyway, there's tons of learning to be had here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put water on, and then now I want you to pay attention to how much the Phthalo Blue runs compared to what we saw with the French Ultramarine Blue, because I think you will notice that it's going to be a lot more of a mover and a shaker, so to speak. That's why normally, you know, if I was the one who had put together the introductory set from Daniel Smith, I would probably not have used the Phthalo Blue. I would probably have used another blue, maybe a Dantron Blue or something like that, or Prussian Blue instead, just because they're a little bit easier to deal with. But Phthalo Blue is a wonderful color, don't get me wrong. It's just that it can be quite a challenge because it just moves so much. And so again, I'm going to start putting in some of that Hansa Yellow Light here into this wet rectangle about halfway down. And now I'm going to put in Phthalo Blue from the other end. I'm going to have to switch it like here, that's easier for me. Can you still see? Yeah. And let's just put it down. Hello, hello, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How are you doing? See, they talk to each other. And I'm going to put some more of this in here and get some of the yellow in. We have to kind of encourage it a little bit. And then let's let it move and hold it the other way. So we just want to do this kind of rocking motion and just watch it like a hawk and see how it moves. And you know, this business of watching paint dry, I don't know, me being me, I find it very interesting because I see all these things that happen that it tells me about the properties of the colors. But you might find it a little tedious, I don't know, depends on your temperament. But you can see how it moves and gives us all these wonderful color combinations. And I'm going to move it like this, I'm going to move it like that, and I'm going to do that until it's mingled. So I'll return when that has happened. So here you can see, it's not quite dry yet. This is almost dry, but can you see the difference in the greens? And look here, you can see that you get granulation here because we use French Ultramarine Blue. That's a granulating color. The Phthalo Blue is not a granulating color. So we have the same yellow, but two different blues, and you can see you get different shades. And you can see here that the Phthalo Blue is a lot more dominant than the French Ultramarine Blue. So what a lot of lessons we get just by doing this. And this is actually wet into wet, what we're doing in these little rectangles here. And that is also, I'm letting the colors mix and mingle by introducing them in their pure form in the wet mix and then letting them mingle there. As opposed to here, when we did the color chart, I mixed physically the colors on my palette first and then I put them on. And I am a big fan in my painting techniques to do a lot more of this type of application because I find I get much more interesting shades and variation in the colors without me doing anything than just introducing the colors to each other and letting them work it out, so to speak, as opposed to mixing a color and then applying it to my watercolor paper. In general, I'm a huge fan of the wet into wet application. So for instance, if I'm painting foliage, instead of mixing myself a green and then painting it green, I like to dabble in some yellow and then I dabble in some blue, and it can be a couple of different blues, it can be a couple of different yellows if I feel that I need more variation. And then I can also mix in, dab in a little bit of red, for instance, if I need to tone it down some places. So that's how I in general like to paint. But anyway, moving right on. So this one here, we're going to do a different color combination. Here we're going to do the French Ultramarine Blue with the Pyrrol Scarlet. So it's almost complementary colors. The Pyrrol Scarlet is this one here. and here is the French Ultramarine Blue. So they're 3 colors apart, so to speak, on this color wheel. And so that will give us a fairly neutral color. And we already know that. I mean, we know a lot of what's going to happen by looking at our chart here. Pyrrol Scarlet and French Ultramarine Blue, that was this almost black, has a little bit something like a very dark eggplant. And then here we have the Pyrrol Scarlet and a French Ultramarine Blue. That's what it looks like in the watered down version. So again, a very muted color because they are almost complementary colors. All right, so that should be fun to see how they behave here when they get to dance on in the wet surface here. Yeah, that's, I don't know, I always think of them, you know, the colors are dancing, they're interacting, and colors have a lot of different properties. They're not all created equal, as we've already seen just in these 2 mixes. Some are granulating, some are staining. This is staining and it's not granulating. Some are movers and others are more stationary, just like people. So let's get the Pyrrol Scarlet, and I have that at this end here, so I'm going to put that in. Very, very rich orangey red. So that would be our warm red, and then we're going to mix it with our warm blue, which is the French Ultramarine Blue. And I need to have a little bit more water in here because it's already drying out. You know, I live in such a dry climate, I always have to get extra water on my paints and on my paper. So here's the French Ultramarine Blue. Let's get that down. Make sure we have it nice and loaded, because it's actually not, I know from experience, and as we already know there, it's not nearly as a strong color as that Pyrrol Scarlet. So let's start letting it move. And let's move it down here. And again, I'm just going to rock it back and forth, and I'm going to come back when that is finished. It's not quite dry yet, but there you see the combination of the Pyrrol Scarlet and the French Ultramarine Blue. And while that dries completely, I went ahead and masked out the bottom row, and here we're going to test out French Ultramarine Blue and Quinacridone Rose, and then the Phthalo Blue and Quinacridone Rose, and then we're going to take the Quinacridone Rose with the new Gamboge. And let's just get some water. So here we're testing out purples first, really, because that's what you get by mixing blue and red. And then it's just a matter of what blue and what red. And here we also have blue and red, but that was the Pyrrol red. So you can see that's, you know, a much more neutral color, or you will see some much more neutral color than when we do the French Ultramarine Blue here with the Quinacridone Rose. So I just need some more water in that French Ultramarine Blue. It dries out so quickly. So French Ultramarine Blue on this side here. We want to have a nice pigment load. Remember, we want to have enough pigment so that it'll move. That's the whole idea. So we can't be too stingy with the color, otherwise you're not really going to get the result you're after. And then let's go over and get some of that Quinacridone Rose, which is such a beautiful, cool red, pink. Pink is the same as a cool red. And then we have our warm blue, which is our French Ultramarine Blue. So let's dab some more of that in, and let's dab some more of the Quinacridone Rose in. There. And let's see how we're doing. And I'm going to let that mix and mingle again, same as before. So I'm just going to give that a few minutes, rocking it back and forth, letting it mix and mingle on the paper. And I am going to get back to you when I've done this. So here you can see it's still drying, but look at that glorious, glorious color combination of the French Ultramarine Blue with the Quinacridone Rose, and compare it to the French Ultramarine Blue with the Pyrrol Scarlet. Can you see the huge difference? Here you also get these textures because of the French Ultramarine Blue being a granulating color, and that will also show up here once it's dry, but in a different manner. It's a much smoother mix you get here with the Quinacridone Rose as compared to the Pyrrol Scarlet. The Pyrrol Scarlet is a semi-transparent, or it's more opaque than the Quinacridone Rose, which is a transparent color. And so they move differently. And then of course here, this is a warm shade of red, this is a cool shade of red. So the French Ultramarine Blue is a warm shade of blue. So those two are, kind of more in the same family than these two. These two are almost complementary, remember? And here you can see there's French Ultramarine Blue, and here's your Pyrrol Scarlet. And then here is your French Ultramarine Blue and your Quinacridone Rose, so they're much closer to each other. And it's a warm blue and then a cool red versus a warm blue and a warm red. They will create more muddy colors, which come in handy sometimes. All right, we're ready to move along, and so then this one here, we're going to do the Phthalo Blue with the Quinacridone Rose. So it's this blue instead of this blue, and it's still this Quinacridone Rose. So let's see how that goes. And again, we are going to put lots of water in, and both these colors, Quinacridone Rose and the Phthalo Blue are transparent colors, and both of them are staining colors. So in spite of the fact that the Phthalo Blue is a cool shade of blue with mixing it with a cool shade of red, it's still going, which is the Quinacridone Rose, it's still going to make a much more vibrant color combination than, for instance, the Pale Red and the French Ultramarine Blue, just because of the nature of the colors. And so we'll see how that goes. And then here is our Quinacridone Rose. Put that in. And we also have to remember that Phthalo Blue, as we know, is a very, very dominant color. And so let's see. Let that get going. And let's tip it the other way. And this again, it takes a little time to get this mixed and mingled, so I'm going to pause the video so that you don't have to watch me do this, and you can maybe do your own. It's not completely dry, but it's pretty close. And look how rich and dark that is. And here you can see the French Ultramarine Blue has dried, mixed with the Quinacridone Rose, and see, you get that granulation from the French Ultramarine Blue, but really a beautiful color transition. And here you can see the one with the Phthalo Blue is going to be, even though it's still wet, so it is darker just because of that, but it is going to be a darker combination. And you can see how in the one with the French Ultramarine Blue and the Quinacridone Rose, you can see how the Quinacridone Rose is the more dominant color, and here you will see that the Phthalo Blue is the more dominant color. And then here again you can see the Pyrrol Scarlet with the French Ultramarine Blue, and how that mixture, dried in a much more uneven fashion, because those two colors really don't get along all that well. However, there will be times when this particular kind of texture is exactly what you're after. It could be good for rocks and stucco walls and that kind of stuff. So there's always a use for the different combinations. You just have to know what colors create them so that you can avoid them when it's detracting from your subject matter, and you can use them to your advantage when that's exactly what you're after. So that's why getting to know your colors is just so important. So the next one I have here is the Quinacridone Rose with a new Gamboge. So that's the only color combination that I have on in this wet into wet mixture that is actually over in the orange family, because I thought we had a big dominance of orange color. So you can see, you can definitely mix a combination of all sorts of wonderful orange colors with this set. But the reason I wanted to demonstrate the Quinacridone Rose with the new Gamboge is that it actually can form a good base for skin tones, and it also is the color combination that will create like more coral colors. So for florals, that's a wonderful combination. So that's why I thought that was what I was going to do there. So without further ado, we are going to again put clean water inside, and we're going to put plenty because we want the colors to mix and mingle, and the more water you put in, the more the colors will flow and spread. If you put them in on dry paper, they stay exactly where you put them. When you put them into a wet area, they spread, and the wetter you have the area, the more they spread and the faster they run. That is how that works. All right, so let's get the Quinacridone Rose in. I'm going to put that at this end because it's the darker of the two. I don't know if that's, you can do however you want it to do it, but that's what I decided and that's what I wrote, so that's where I'm going to put it. All right, it's about halfway. And let's get lots of pigment in here so that it'll run. And then I am going to use my new Gamboge, which is my warm yellow. So it's my cool red with my warm yellow. That's what we're having here. All right, let's get that in there. Let's have them say hello. And there we have it. Okay, I think that's good. And then here we go with the rocking of the colors. And yeah, they are just busy mingling, as you can see. And I will complete this step and then we'll take a look. Here you can see it's almost dried. And it's beautiful, beautiful glowing combination. And here you can see the Phthalo Blue and the Quinacridone Rose. See how dark that dried compared to the French Ultramarine Blue. And I will have to wait for that to dry, and then I can put the last piece of tape on. Then we'll do the last row, which is the French Ultramarine Blue with the new Gamboge and the Phthalo Blue with the new Gamboge, and then finally I have the Phthalo Blue with the Pyrrol Scarlet. So the next one here I'm going to demo is French Ultramarine Blue with new Gamboge, and I made a mistake and so I dabbed it out right away, so hopefully it'll still work out just fine. So I'm going to water this down again, and we'll put our new Gamboge in, our warm yellow, and that's going to be with our warm blue. So it might be just a little bit off of what it really should be, but I don't feel like doing this whole thing over again. So we're just going to make it work. And that's the French Ultramarine Blue. So that's our warm blue and our warm red. So we already know that's going to give us a much more muted green than what we have up there with the Hansa Yellow Light. And get lots of that French Ultramarine Blue in. Dab that in here. And there we go. And then we're going to mix it back and forth. And once that's done, I'm going to turn the camera back on again. Alrighty, this has dried now, so let's take a look. I'm glad I managed to rescue it before it was too late. So you can see there, you get a much more muted green. So these are like evergreen greens, mossy greens, and you get the texture from the French Ultramarine Blue. You can see it's not nearly as bright as when you use the Hansa Yellow Light. When you use the new Gamboge, that's a very warm yellow. It's almost like you're mixing complementary colors together. And now we'll see what it looks like when we mix the new Gamboge with our Phthalo Blue. And get the water on, clean water. So it, in between every square here I go out and I clean out my dirty water. just so I don't get any contamination. And here we go, nice and shiny. And then let's just, so it's Hansa Yellow Light. It's not the Hansa Yellow Light, it's new Gamboge. Now I better not mess it up here. Right at the home stretch. That would be really not very much fun. So here's the Hansa Yellow Light, here's the new Gamboge, our warm yellow. As you can see, it's almost like, it's very close to orange, I would say. So that's that. And then we need our Phthalo Blue. And here we are. As you know, this is a very strong color that moves a lot. And so let's let them say hello to each other. Dab in some more. There. I think that should be good. And let it start moving. And I'm going to come back once this has settled in. Right. So it's still drying. But you can see it's a more muted green tone and, you know, darker because of the new Gamboge being much more reddish, but still a beautiful, beautiful range of greens you see here. And because it's with the Phthalo Blue, there's no granulation where we saw granulation with the French Ultramarine Blue. So lots of fantastic green shades for you to work with in your landscapes and florals and whatnot. Last but not least, we're going to go with another more neutral. We're going to go with Phthalo Blue and Pyrrol Scarlet. So those are almost complementary colors, as you can see on the color wheel here. Pyrrol Scarlet and the Phthalo Blue. This is a very orangey red, and this is a turquoisey blue. So both of them are leaning towards the yellow, so that means that we basically have all three primary colors represented. And that's the one we can see over here, Phthalo Blue and Pyrrol Scarlet, and basically creates a black, a lovely black. And I mean, again, all these rules are, you can break them, and there is no watercolor police that gets after you. If you put black, you can buy black out of the tube, but again, it's one of the colors that I stay away from because I think they look kind of dead, and I know how to mix my own blacks, and that way I can push them to be anything from a blue black, a purple black, a greenish black, brownish black, you know, and so you can get much, much more interesting blacks by mixing your own, and then they will match and go with the colors you already have in your painting. That's just my theory on that. So I'm putting the clean water in here, and let's start with the Phthalo Blue. Put that on here, and I want to have a lot of pigment so that it can run, mix and mingle. That's the whole idea. And then let's get our Pyrrol Red. That goes in here, and again, you know, Phthalo Blue is a transparent color and Pyrrol Red is semi-transparent. Not quite as transparent as, for instance, the Quinacridone Rose. All the Quinacridone colors are transparent. That's one of the reasons I love them, I think. Alright, so let's get this show on the road. Get those colors to mix and mingle. And I'm going to get back to you once I have the Phthalo Blue and the Pyrrol Scarlet mixed. I took the masking tape off, and my Phthalo Blue Pyrrol Scarlet combination is almost dry, and you can see that it's exactly what I predicted. It is basically a black when it's really solid here, and where there's an overtone of the blue, the Phthalo Blue, and so it's if it was watered down, you would get gray tones from blue grays to mid-tone grays to reddish grays, and then over to like a brownish color. So there you have it, and you can see because these two colors are not granulating, you don't get that texture that you get with the French Ultramarine Blue, and you get a darker color because of the nature of Pyrrol Scarlet and the Phthalo Blue green shade. So I hope you found this exercise useful and that you're getting to know your colors even better. And I am going to make another video with more on the color theory behind these colors, and then I'm going to disclose which 6 additional colors I am going to add to this basic set from Daniel Smith to complete a 12 color palette with the colors that I personally would prefer. Now, you can try and start thinking about it yourself. What colors would you add if you could add another 6 colors to the basic color set from Daniel Smith? We have the New Gamboge, we have French Ultramarine, and we have Pyrrol Scarlet for the warm primary colors, and then we have the Hansa Yellow Light, the Phthalo Blue green shade, and the Quinacridone Rose as the primary cool colors in this 6 color split primary palette. And so I'm going to add another 6 colors that will round out the colors that I have in my palette, where I find that it'll give me the most versatile color palette where I can mix basically any color that I could come up with. So that's something for you to ponder and think about what you would choose, and then we can compare notes when I have that video ready for you. And in the meantime, I wish you happy painting. Hope everybody's staying safe, sound, and sane and creative. And if you're not feeling so creative, then these kinds of little projects are actually wonderful to work with, because once you start working with the colors, I really feel that it gets you in the mood of painting. That's at least how it works for me. So wishing you happy painting, and see you soon in another YouTube video.